Where are you on this, and is there any connection between what Trump is saying and the truth?
Well, Chris, here's one of the hardest things about this is the big gap between what our president is saying and what's true. First, he's claiming that there's something like $110 billion in arms sales at risk here. There isn't. That's just not true. After President Trump visited Saudi Arabia, there's been maybe $4 billion in arms sales that have been projected. Second, we're a country of values, not just a country of interests. And it is astonishing to me that President Trump, even after the 2 years we've gone through, it is still surprising to me that with a straight face he can say that we shouldn't put at risk arms sales because that's not in America's best interests. Chris, what's in America's best interest is to be a country that stands for something, that stands for free speech, the protection of journalists, and the advancement of human rights. That's got to be at the head of the line of our interests around the world, is protecting the values that define us as America. Our president is instead turning that on its head and saying that what we're most interested in is selling weapons to anybody who will pay us for them. That's not why we sell weapons to other countries. We sell weapons to those countries that are our allies, that share our interests and share our values. Increasingly, it's clear that Saudi Arabia doesn't share our values. And while I recognize they are a vital ally of ours in the Middle East in the project of pushing back on Iranian aggression, I don't think we should do that at any cost. And the cost here is one that goes right to the very core of who we are as a country. I was struck that Treasury Secretary Mnuchin appeared in the Middle East and went to meet with the Saudi Crown Prince MBS and took a grinning photo today. This does not suggest that the Trump administration is taking this issue seriously.
Do you think the president wants this to fade? He wants this issue to just fade without any action appropriate to a murder, to a premeditated murder?
Yes. You don't wait for the further developments in an investigation that's being run by a murder suspect if you're serious about getting to the bottom of it. Any of our last four presidents would have been calling for an international investigation, would have been calling for either the FBI, our own intelligence community, or our partners throughout the world to be conducting a thorough investigation with the Turks to get to the bottom of this, not asking the Saudis to take more time if they'd like to come up with another explanation that is clearly not true. For the first 2 weeks, the Saudis told the world that Khashoggi walked out alive of their own consulate in Istanbul. Clearly not true. Now they've made up another story. Clearly not true. As I suspect we will hear tomorrow from Erdogan, president of Turkey, they've got detailed information about this that may make this even more difficult for the Saudis to maintain with a straight face.
Well, during an interview with CNN, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, the crown prince, if you will, declined to say whether or not he bought the most recent excuse provided by the Saudis. Let's listen to Jared.
With regards to the situation in Saudi Arabia, I'd say that right now as an administration, we're more in the fact-finding phase, and we're obviously getting as many facts as we can from the different places, and then we'll determine which facts are credible. We have to be able to work with our allies, and Saudi Arabia has been, I think, a very strong ally.
You know, the ways you're raising the question of values versus interests, there's a guy who seems to be a business type, whatever you think of him. He doesn't think, I don't think Jared Kushner's the guy you bring in for a values discussion. He's out to make some money. He's out to cut a deal. I think he's a ridiculous person, by the way, and I'll just say this. Why the hell he's going to put together a Middle East deal based on the Saudis underwriting some crazy deal with the Israelis? I don't know what they're thinking about. I think they're crazy. Just in terms of putting all their money on Jared and the Saudis to underwrite a reasonable Middle East deal. Your thoughts?
Well, Chris, there was another important speech this week that was given that I think President Trump and Jared are trying to distract us from, that was about values and money. Mitch McConnell said his biggest disappointment in this Congress was their failure to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and that he thinks the biggest thing affecting our deficits is the entitlement program, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. I think everybody ought to be focusing on the fact that the Republicans want to repeal the protections for pre-existing conditions and want to find a way to cut entitlement programs, and are frankly focusing us on this Middle Eastern allegedly caravan of folks that includes allegedly gangsters and Middle Easterners, rather than focusing on our core values of protecting human rights around the world and advancing the health care interests of average Americans. Chris, I think this is just a matter of a shell game where they're trying to distract us from what really matters to the average American.
I think you should tell, as I said in the first part of the show, you should remind every voter that Mitch McConnell is coming after your Social Security, your Medicare, and your Medicaid. And it's for real. It's all on tape. And he means it. Unlike Trump, he is a real ideologue, and he's after it. And he's the leader of the Republican Senate. Thank you so much, Chris Coons of Delaware. Up next, President Trump is in Texas tonight, stumping for his one-time enemy, Ted Cruz, the son of the guy he said